Estaba así, buscando, salían de yo tenía de los
People might have gotten their vacation already.
Y me salió el cambio. Y luego me salió su video, pues.
All right, well, it is time to get going in class. So one thing I did want to let you know about is we have a tutor right here in the Yuba College Success Center who's devoted to this class, and she's somebody that did really well in the class and seems really good at helping other students do well. So I encourage you to check out the College Success Center if you don't know about that already. It's over here in the library, and I think you can even just, I'm going to share my screen here. I think you can even go online here. So College Success Center is on our Yuba College website. I just Googled College Success Center at Yuba College, and they have different information here. You see Sociology 1 and 2 are part of the program. And so if you contact them, you can, I think, set up your own individual tutoring. They may have group tutoring available. And then as we get closer to the exam, I may see about them setting up like a study session just for the exam. So, but I do want to make sure people know, especially if English is not your first language, if you've been having trouble understanding any of my lectures, some of you look like a little lost maybe, then you need to take some extra time to figure out, to translate or learn what I'm saying in English. So, so I encourage you to check out College Success Center. Any questions about that? All right, I'm going to stop sharing my content and remember to do that so that the camera actually is active. All right, so we're continuing on with our discussion of what is conflict theory. But as part of that, another thing I want to say, by the way, about how we run the class is I'm recording all these. I don't think I gave you the Zoom link, but what I'm going to put on our Facebook, I'll put on our Canvas announcement. I'll announce for you that you can watch if you have to miss class. Like Colby was somebody very active in the class that he hasn't been coming, but it's because he didn't have transportation, I don't think, or something like that. I'm saying too much. But he could actually be participating in the class right now because we're on Zoom right now, and he could actually be hearing in real time synchronously and seeing what we're doing in here. So when I post that link, that'll be something you have there. If you remember, it's always going to be there in the announcements. And anytime you're not able to come to class, you could still join the class via the internet. So I hope you'll look into that. Okay, some of you coming in late, I've been telling the class about tutoring, which I really hope you'll look into over here at the College Success Center. And if you have any questions about that, you can come talk to me privately about it. And I've also been talking about our ability to watch this class in real time on Zoom. And also just remind you, as I've said before, even not in real time, if you go on Canvas and into this class shell, you'll see that there's materials there, old lectures and other things. So if you can still follow along the class, even if you're not here for our lectures. So I don't want people to get in the habit of doing that, just staying home because you're in the live class and you should come to class. But there are options if you can't be here. Any questions about any of that? Nope. Okay. So our larger question we're covering, well, our overall question is what is sociology? But as part of our answer to that question, we're asking what is conflict theory? And as part of our answer to that question, we're asking what is capitalism? And as we learned the other day, Karl Marx in conflict theory see capitalism as a mode of production. And we already talked about this idea of the mode of production. And we said, according to Marx, there's just been 4 modes of production in the human history. I won't spend time writing them all out again. Well, primitive communism, slave society, feudal society, and finally capitalism. And that's where we were getting into the other day. Remember, the key idea here is a mode of production is how is food and shelter produced in the society? And according to this Marxist way of thinking, or this conflict theory way of thinking, how a society gets its food and shelter kind of leads to a whole bunch of other things about the society, like politics, like how the government is set up, and like religion, how are people's religious beliefs shaped, and a lot of other things about people's daily lives are affected by this basic question of how do people get their food and shelter. And so we looked at what Marx says are the 4 main ways or the 3 main ways this has been done through human history. One way was through hunting and gathering. That's the primitive communism, just gathering what nature already provides. Another way is for one group to force another group to do all the producing while the other group enjoys the fruits of all that labor. That was called slave society. The third way was to have a kind of symbiotic relationship between the group that's working, the peasants or serfs, and the class that's ruling over them, the aristocracy. And the aristocracy and the peasantry have this kind of agreement. We'll do all the work, the peasants will grow all the food, we'll make all this stuff, and you guys protect us. You be the military people that run the government and that protect us from other people that might want to, take what we have. So what is capitalism then? Well, capitalism disrupts all of this because this new group of people called the merchants, who are buying things from one feudal area and selling it to another, start to have conflict with the aristocracy. The aristocracy that ran feudalism wants to control what's bought and sold in their realms, in their kingdoms, and the capitalists want to be able to buy and sell whatever they're not called capitalists yet, they're called merchants. And they just want to be able to buy and sell what they have to the people, the peasants living in these areas. And so capitalism begins with, this is for capitalism. And it begins with the nobility being stripped of its power, the aristocracy, the lords, the people who own the estates, as we talked about, the ones who have the castles and the armies. And they are stripped of their power, meaning the merchants get so powerful with money that they're able to hire their own armies, basically, and start threatening the warrior classes of the aristocracy and saying, you better let us do what we want to do or you're going to lose your power. And either they let them do what they wanted to do or they lost their power and were killed and things like that. And so they're stripped of power. In the countries where the aristocracy wasn't slaughtered, like in France, they were killed, a lot of them. In other countries, like England, they let them keep their estates and things, but they were just like this landed gentry, they called them, people with nice land, but they weren't necessarily, they weren't in charge of things. In England, they stripped the monarchy, the king and queen. They said, you get to still be king and queen, but you don't run the show. We're going to have a parliament. We're going to have these political parties like the Tory, the Conservatory Party, the Labour Party, and we're going to be making laws and deciding things, and you king and queen, you just sort of sit there and look pretty. And so they still have a royal class in England, but that royal class doesn't have power. It doesn't have authority. It just sort of sits there and looks pretty, and people like to follow them in magazines and stuff like that. But the royals aren't really in power. Who is in power in England and in America? The business class, the class of people that, created this new system called democracy. The serfs, then, what happens to them? They had this symbiotic relationship, we said, with the aristocrats. They grew all the food and, paid taxes to the lords, and the lords protected them. But now the lords don't have any power. So what happens to the serfs? They're driven off the land. And this is an important point because, as I mentioned the other day, you didn't necessarily agree to be a wage laborer, to be somebody who has to sell your work to somebody else. That's what most of us have to do to live under capitalism, to get our food and shelter. We have to sell what we can do to somebody else. And a lot of us, if we had a choice, would say, well, I'd rather not sell it. I'd rather just make the things I know how to make or do the things I know how to do, and you pay me directly. That's called like being self-employed. Like if I'm a gig, that's what gig workers and stuff, like if I'm a doctor, I can just open my own doctor's office and you can come pay me to help heal you. Most doctors don't get to do that nowadays. Most doctors nowadays are wage laborers. They work for a company like a health maintenance organization and they get paid a wage. And a lot of doctors don't like that. I know people that gave up being doctors because they're like, I thought I was going to be in charge of my own practice, but instead, I'm working for somebody else. And all of us have to work for somebody else, but did we decide that? Did we willingly choose that? And Marx says no, and still around the world, there are peasant classes of people that are being pushed off the land by capitalists who want to come in and say, no, you don't get to have this land anymore, we're gonna, take it over. That's happening in India, it's happening in South America, it's happening in other places where capitalism still hasn't fully established itself. But how did it happen in England? Remember this big map I had the other day? Europe was over here. This is UK. And we're going to come back to this map, but the United Kingdom is off the coast of Europe, so here's Europe. And the United Kingdom is where capitalism got started. And one reason it's called the United Kingdom, the UK, is because it's used to be a bunch of smaller kingdoms, a bunch of lords, feudal estates, all over England. Each feudal lord ruled his kingdom, his earldom, his duchy, his, those kinds of things, his county. And in England, famous counties, County Cork and all these different counties. Well, there was so much warfare going on in the Middle Ages and in the Dark Ages that eventually they said, well, let's unite as one kingdom, and we'll have one king that rules over all of England. And England was called, and still calls itself, a commonwealth, meaning this wealth, this land, this rich area, we all own it in common, meaning we, the people of England, own this land called England. But the king is the one who controls it. So the king decides who gets to do what on the land of the people. I'm the king, I represent the people, and the people's, the choices that people make are made through me. So like I said the other day, if you were a serf working on somebody's feudal land, you were a farmer on that land, your granddad was, your great-granddad, nobody can remember as far back as your family has been there working the land. You've always been there. Because the king always gave you leave, meaning gave you permission to have that land, to work that land. And the king could at times say, well, no, you don't have permission, I'm giving it to this other person. But most of the time, for centuries, people just lived in their villages and worked their land and grew their food and grew their corn and, made their wood and stuff like that. Maybe not corn, that came later. But when the nobility is stripped of its power, when the king is gotten rid of, now the question is, well, whose wealth is this? Whose land is all of this? How do we decide whose land it is? And these merchants were the ones now taking charge, the bourgeoisie, we'll call them in a second. They take charge of the government and they say, well, we got to figure out whose land is whose. And what are they good at? Merchants, they're good at buying and selling stuff. That's what they do. So they try to come up with a system. How can you buy and sell land? Because land just sits there. You can't just like pick it up and sell it. How do you buy and sell land? There never was private property before this. No one ever had thought of this idea that somebody could say, this land is mine and that land is yours. But how do you do that? Well, it was done with what we called the Enclosure Acts, a series of laws that Parliament passed where they said this land now doesn't belong to the king. It's being enclosed, meaning fences are being put around it. So you can't just call it common land. It used to be if you were a peasant, you just walked around on the land wherever you could walk, you know. But now they're saying, no, we're going to put a grid over the whole of England, basically. An imaginary grid. Draw lines over the map in your mind. And each one of these little squares is a parcel, meaning a piece of land. And now we're going to have an auction. A big auction to see who wants to buy this parcel of land, who wants to buy this parcel of land. And the auction takes place in London, so you have London over here somewhere. Who are the rich people in London who can go to an auction and bid thousands of pounds on land? Well, merchants. And if you were a peasant living way up here, growing food, you didn't know about the auction, you didn't know anything about it, and you don't read. And if you were an aristocrat living in the estate, you have this nice land, a nice castle, but you don't have a bunch of cash sitting around, a bunch of dollar bills or pounds, they call them, and shillings. But merchants have tons of cash because they're the guys going around buying and selling stuff. So they've got stacks of cash and they go to their auction and they bid on it. Yes, I'll take that parcel. Yes, I'll bid 1,000 pounds on that parcel. And so suddenly all the land of England is sold off. And if you're a peasant, you knew nothing about it. You didn't have a chance to bid on it. You didn't have cash to bid on it, even if you wanted to. But you're told one day, a sheriff arrives in your town and says, by order of Parliament, this land's been sold to one John Smith in London, and you are hereby ordered to vacate the land. And like, vacate the land? What are you talking about? Leave. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Nice knowing you. And so these people are like, what do you mean leave? This is where I grow food. This is where my dad grew food. My grandpa, all my great-grandparents have always grown food here, but you're telling me I have to leave because I don't own it? What do you mean own it? The king owns it. Well, not anymore. This private person owns it. A private person you never heard of, that you don't know, that you didn't vote for, that you don't have any say over, they own the land. And this happens a lot still nowadays. Like I'm saying, there are peasants in places like India and Mexico and other places that are told one day, it's not your land anymore, bye. So what can you do if you always were self-employed, growing your own food, making your own wood products, and now you're told you can't live in this shop anymore, you can't live on this farm anymore? You have to go work for somebody else. Go say, well, I know how to grow food. Do you have land I can be employed growing food on? I know how to make stuff with wood, but I don't have a shop anymore to make it in. Where can I do that? So this whole class of people is created, in other words. They were peasants, they were self-employed people, they were independent commodity producers, was the way Marx put it. Independent meaning no one owned them, no one was their boss. But now this whole group of people, the peasantry, is being told, if you want to eat, you have to go sell your labor to somebody. You have to sell your ability to work to somebody else. You don't get to use your ability to work for yourself. I'm emphasizing this point because a lot of Americans, for example, complain about taxes. Oh, whenever I work, I got to pay taxes to the government. But what I never hear people complaining about is whenever you work, your boss makes much more money than you did. You did all this work and they get the pay. And you get a little piece of it. And no one ever complains about my boss took all my money that I made. But if you were working for yourself, you'd make that money for yourself. So capitalists, so Marxists like Marxists like Marx are saying, workers are being exploited, but it isn't the government that's doing it. They used to pay taxes to the government and they liked doing it because it was a good deal. We get to stay in peace and the government protects us with military. But now you're getting more of your money taken by your employer than you are by the government. So anyway, that's so the serfs are driven off the land, and now these merchants, by the way, So the peasants are no longer peasants, the serfs. We don't call them that now. They become what are called wage laborers, wage workers, or in Marxist terms, they're the proletariat. Proletariat, meaning the working class, the workers, the worker class, the people who actually do work. And the merchants aren't really merchants anymore because they're not just moving from place to place to buy and sell stuff. They've now taken over the government of places like England and France. And so they're taking charge of the area. And so they're not really merchants as a class anymore. Marx calls them the capitalists, or really the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie is the owners, the owner class. So there's workers and there's owners in capitalism. And that's pretty much the only classes that you have. You've seen in these other modes of production that we talked about, there might be sort of different classes going on. But really in capitalism, there's the people that own the land, and there's the people that have to work for the people that own the land. And that's, you can ask yourself, where are you? And I see this conflict, and so it's a conflict. We see that conflict in this area all the time, I think. I mean, you have people that own land, they grow peaches on it, for example, and they want to make money by selling the peaches, but they don't pick the peaches themselves. They hire people to come pick the peaches. And who picks peaches cheaply? Well, if you're trying to make money selling peaches, you want to pay people to pick peaches as little as possible. So who can you pay? Well, for example, illegal immigrants. People who have no chance to complain about how much you pay them, and you can even use the cops to scare them. I'll pay you very little money to pick my peaches. You're not paying. And then they complain and say, oh, look at all these illegal immigrants coming in the country. But they're the ones, in fact, benefiting. Anyway, so not to make fun of landowners, but definitely landowners have different interests from people who don't own land. If you don't own the land, the peach orchards around here, or or the rice fields, and you want to work, you can go maybe work for rice owners and peach owners. And the rice guys, they make tons of money. They even get paid money to not grow rice. That's called corporate welfare. Our government actually pays rich rice farmers to not grow rice. Here's a bunch of money to not do anything. Why? Because if they did grow rice, the price of rice would go down, and then other rice farmers wouldn't make as much. So our government actually pays wealthy rice farmers to not grow rice. And then those same rich guys are the conservatives that say, these people shouldn't be on welfare, these working people shouldn't get free stuff from the government. What about the millions of dollars you just got free from the government? Anyway, I'm just trying to show you the different conflicting interests of classes. One class owns land, they have a certain way of making money, and their interests are opposed to people whose interests are selling your labor for as much money as possible. I want the highest wage possible, and the guy paying you wants to pay you the lowest wage possible. And so these two sides are in conflict with each other. And according to, and by the way, these French words, proletariat and bourgeoisie, they just help you sound like you're an educated person. I notice people have started to use the word bourgeois again. They say bougie, bad, and bougie and stuff. To be bourgeois is to be, more concerned with money than anything else. And that's what Marx felt about the bourgeoisie. They were so consumed with making money that they valued everything in terms of how much money it could make, rather than in other kinds of things. But we'll get to that later. Well, the problem with capitalism, according to Marx, is the working class is going to get so big and poor that it's going to want to overthrow the owning class. But why does that happen? To understand that, we can't really understand Marx's argument without looking at the next part of it, which is Roman numeral 2, which is mode of exchange. So it's one thing to produce goods, produce commodities, but now the question is, how are they circulated? In other words, how do you get one good to another place? And it's called trade. exchange, trade of goods. And according to Marx, each mode of production has a certain way of exchanging goods. And under capitalism, the way that we do it, that's the real problem with capitalism. And so what is he talking about here? Well, under primitive communism, remember under primitive communism, there really was no production because everything is just gotten from the land. And so according to Marx, if you're getting things from the land, you're not getting more than you need, you're getting what you need and using it. And so if you're not getting more than what you need, there's nothing for you to trade with anybody else. There's only what you consume. So no surplus, in other words, no extra means no exchange, according to Marx. Now, we've gotten a lot more evidence nowadays, a lot more study of primitive peoples than we used to have, and we don't call them primitive anymore, but indigenous, people from way back when, and we now know there was a lot more trade and other things going on than Marx knew about. But in his view, it's accurate to say that, they were mainly involved in getting what they needed. Maybe if there was trade, it was for pretty things like shells and beads and stuff, but not food and shelter. So he's saying for food and shelter, that's, there really was no exchange. But under slave society, if you recall, now because slaves are doing all the labor and they're working much longer hours than they would want to, they are producing extra. And and like we said, if you were an ancient city-state like Rome, and you produce way more grapes and wine than you could consume, you might want to trade that wine and grapes with some other city-state that has things that they have too much of. Like up in England, maybe they have wool that they've got too much of. And down in Italy, we need more wool, so we're going to trade some wine for some wool. But that means you're trading one commodity for another. You're trading a C for a C. Commodity, C stands for commodity here. And so another term for that is barter. Like, oh, you have grapes, I have wool. Well, let's try to come to a deal. How much grapes is worth how much wool? I'll give you, 1 ton of grapes for, half a ton of wool, or I don't know. And if we can come to agreement, we can trade our commodities. But under feudal society, when you have merchants, a new invention is created. It's called money, abstract money. So under feudal society, I can take a commodity and I can trade it, not for another commodity, but for money, M. And then if I want to, I can turn around and trade my money for some other commodity. What is abstract money? Well, back in slave society, they had gold. If you know about ancient times, ancient Rome, they used gold as coins. So like you could get a coin that would be a gold coin. But a gold coin was worth what the gold used to make it was worth. In other words, a gold coin was the same as a chunk of gold. If it was an ounce of gold, it's an ounce of gold. It doesn't matter that it's stamped to look like a coin with the emperor's face on it. It was stamped that way, but it's still real money in the sense that this coin has real value because it's gold. So, I can trade this for gold. And if I had a chunk of gold that's not a coin, I could still trade it. But that's not very efficient because gold is heavy. And if you're going to be trading things like buying a bunch of grapes in Rome and selling them for wool way up in England, you don't want to be carrying tons and tons of gold around with you. And so when we ask, well, how are merchants able to move from place to place, buying and selling stuff? They didn't do it by using gold. They did it by creating this new thing called money. So like if you look in your wallet right now, I don't know where mine is, that's probably that sign. You have maybe you have paper. Well, nowadays our money is so abstract we don't even carry cash. Our money is just like numbers on a line and you just Venmo. I just press some numbers on a phone and you get money. And it's abstract because like this $10 bill is the same as this $20 bill in terms of real value. They're just a piece of paper with some ink on it. They're not worth anything. If you were to buy a piece of paper with ink on it, it's like 1 cent or nothing. In fact, it's weird. I think it's weird with pennies. Actually, pennies are worth more as metal than they are as pennies, but that's a problem. But these are not worth anything as paper. But I'm going to keep them because abstract, they represent real value. They represent value in a bank somewhere, and so I can trade them for value. But that's not abstract, and paper is a lot lighter, it's a lot easier to trade, and it means that I can do much more complicated trades. If I want to trade commodities, then I have to find somebody else that has a commodity I want. And they have to want what I have. If I go up to England for wool and they say, well, we don't want grapes, we don't like grapes, we don't drink wine, we're Protestants up here. Well, I have all these grapes. Well, sorry, we have wool, but not for grapes. Well, I can't trade. It limits my trading options if I have to trade commodities directly for commodities. But if I can trade my commodity for this paper money, well, paper money, first of all, can sit around for years, so I don't need to trade right away. Like if I just have too many grapes, but I don't need anything else, I can just trade my grapes for money, and then my money can sit there. Or if I can trade for some wool, if I can trade for some money with this guy, he doesn't have anything I want, but he wants my grapes, well, I'll trade for money. Now I can go back to England, and they want my money, but they didn't want my grapes, but I can trade money for their wool. So a three-way trade or a four-way trade or a five-way trade becomes possible when you've got cash involved, when you've got this abstract thing. So that was a big invention, and that's what made merchants possible. It made it possible for guys to go from place to place with large ships full of stuff and sell it here and buy over there. But what happens in capitalism? In capitalism, something weird happens. Now, if I'm a capitalist, not a merchant anymore, I'm a capitalist, so I take some money and I go and I buy a commodity with it, and now I sell my commodity for more money than I started with. Make sure in this equation you have M prime. See this little slash here? That means this M is not the same as this M. This amount of money is not the same as this amount of money. It doesn't equal it. Whereas throughout human history, people traded equals for equals. This commodity equals this commodity. It's different commodities, but the amount of grapes I traded, I didn't trade for way more wool than my grapes were worth. They gave me how much wool my grapes were worth. And same here. I traded my grapes for, $1,000, and I bought $1,000 worth of wool. So this is $1,000 and this is $1,000. It's all the same. But in capitalism, if I'm a capitalist, I can go buy some grapes for $1,000, and then I can do something to the grapes, and then I sell them and I make $1,100. It's called profit. And that's really cool, isn't it? That you can end up with more than you started with as a capitalist. People call it flipping nowadays. I flipped this thing, I bought this thing and I flipped it and I made more money than I started with. But Marx says, but how is that possible? Where did this extra money come from? I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to give you extra credit right now if you can come. No, I'm not going to give you extra credit, but I'll let you, if I were to give you each $100 right now and say, you can only go to Home Depot right now and buy $100 worth of wood. And then I'm going to ask you to come back here later today with $110. Do you have any ideas how you could take $100 right now, go to Home Depot, and come back later with $110? Can you turn $100 worth of wood into $110 worth of cash? Can you take $100, buy $100 worth of lumber, and come back with 110? Who's got any ideas of how you could do that? I would hope this is kind of a fun question. I'm asking you, how can you make money with money? How can you take $100? Is there any way? If you have no ideas about it, then I feel sorry for you because it sounds like you might not survive in our capitalist society. But in capitalism, you have to be a hustler. You have to figure out, how am I going to take something of value and turn it around and make more value out of it? But do you have any ideas?
Can you make a table?
Okay, so you're going to make some wood, something nice out of it. And why would, so somebody might pay you $110 for a table, even though the wood in the table was only $100 worth of wood. Okay, now you're talking. Any other ideas?
Flip something you bought.
Huh?
Flip something you bought.
So yeah, how are you gonna turn $100 worth of wood into $110 of cash? What are you gonna do with the wood? She's gonna make a table out of it and sell the table for $110, so she just made $10 profit. What are you gonna do with the wood? Nothing you could do with $100 worth of wood to sell it for more than you paid for it?
Just sell it, like resell it on like their website.
Okay, but why would somebody pay you $110 for the same wood that you just got at Home Depot for $100? Do you have any ideas about how are you gonna get them to pay that? Because they're not dumb, I hope. So why would they give you? Can you think there are ways to do it? So how could you get somebody to give you $110 for the $100 you paid for the wood? Making something out of it is a very honest way of doing it. That's the most, she's an independent commodity producer. That's how the peasants did it. They bought wood, they turned it into something, and they sold it at the marketplace for more money. That's an independent contract, that's a self-employed person, craftsperson, making something of value and selling it.
Maybe trading something for something else.
Well, but I'm asking you to trade it for cash. That's the only thing I'm gonna give you the grade for. So how are you gonna get $110 for cash? Although you've come up with a kind of interesting idea, because that's actually, my sons watch this guy, Mr. Beast, and I guess he does things like this where he'll start with like a fork. And how could I turn this fork into a cruise ship? You know, I don't think it's a really accurate thing. I don't know. I try to explain it to my sons, but yeah, if you could get somebody to trade you wood for something more valuable than wood and then sell that thing, maybe, but I only have today to do it. So I'm saying, what are you gonna do with the wood to make the wood more valuable? You gonna make something, any other ideas?
You prime and paint it, so
Well, so I think that's similar to what she's saying. You're just gonna turn it into something else, a finished product, that's called. So you're adding value is the way they put it in the marketplace, is they say she's added value. She made it into a chair or a table, and so it's more valuable than just unfinished wood. But aside from finishing the wood, is there anything you could do with the wood to make it more valuable? You guys better learn. This is capitalism we're talking about. If you can't turn around and make $1, you're gonna not survive. Any other ideas? You can think of it. So you wanted to put it for sale. Why? So I asked you, why would somebody, there are times people would pay you more than $100 for the wood you paid for $100. What kinds of reasons would they do that?
I mean, you could just like toss the receipt or like don't have any evidence of like how much it was. when you purchased it.
Yeah, you could fool them. So they say in the capitalist world, there's a sucker born every minute. You could say it was magic wood. This is magic wood. And they might pay you more, but that wouldn't be adding real value to it according to Marx, you know, and it wouldn't be a sustainable practice. If you keep lying about your wood, people are gonna figure it out after a while and stop buying it. But is there a real way to make your wood more valuable? I hope you guys need to learn a few things about life. Well, one thing is you could carry it to someplace else, right? So if you're trying to sell it here near Home Depot, then no one's gonna pay you more than Home Depot selling it for. But if you were to take it like up in the mountains where there is no Home Depot, wood's gonna cost more there. There are different market prices for different things. So like the market for wood is, I'm sure, higher up in Truckee than it is down here. And more than Truckee, go way up into like Quincy, a much more rural area where there aren't places to buy lumber. So if you were to take it up there, you could probably sell it for more. Another thing you can do, and this is how a lot of places make money nowadays, is they buy a large amount of something, and then they break it up into smaller amounts. That's called buying wholesale and then selling retail. So like if you bought $100 worth of wood, you could break it up into smaller bundles and sell it as firewood. Maybe not everyone wants $100 worth of lumber, but they might want $10 worth of firewood. So if I were to make 11 bundles of firewood, 11 $10 bundles of firewood, I could sell those on the street, firewood. I didn't finish it, but I kind of changed the wood a little bit, and I repackaged it, I remarketed it, and retailed it as little wood packages instead of one big wood package. So those are the main ways. I've been teaching this class a long time, and when we try to think of what are ways you can make money with wood, those are the three main ways. You can make something out of it, You can buy it wholesale and sell it retail, meaning turn it into smaller packages and sell more of them. Or you could take it somewhere or to some time. You could wait, for example, like sometimes like when you buy a house, you wait until the housing prices go up and then you sell it. So either at another time or another place, that wood might be more expensive. So you can go to that time or place and sell it there. But what did you add? So in all these cases, we're saying I'm taking $100, I'm buying wood with it. So I took $100, I bought wood, and then really I added something. Because when you then sold it for $110, something got added to the wood. And you said it already. What did you add to your wood to add value? You said the word earlier. Labor. You added work. You changed the wood. You spent time and effort, sweat and tears to turn that wood into something else. And so if someone's paying you $110 for the $100 worth of wood, what they're really paying for is your labor. They're saying, thank you for doing that, for taking that time and effort. Here's the $10 you're asking for your time. But capitalists aren't independent commodity producers. I said that you were an independent commodity producer, but now I want you to pay her to make your table. She's gonna buy $100 of the wood, she's gonna have you spend an hour making a table, she's gonna be able to sell it for $110. How much did you want for your hour's worth of work? Why? Because she bought the wood. Why don't you go buy your own wood and make your own table?
Maybe you don't have money to buy it.
Well, exactly. So if you're desperate and she's got money and you don't, then you might be willing to go do, she's gonna make $10 off of your labor, but you're only gonna take half of it. It's my labor, but you get $5 worth of it. Why? Because you did what? Because you bought the wood? And that's what capitalists say. I took the risk. I bought the wood. But a lot of us say, well, if I could take the risk, I would, because I'd rather take the full $10 of my labor than the $5 of the labor. And so, but Marx is saying what you added, what did you add when you took it up to the mountains to sell it for more than you paid for it? You added labor. You got in a truck, you put gas in the truck, you put the wood in the truck. Work is like exerting energy to move something, basically. That's what work is in physics. And so your truck did some work, you did some work to fill your truck with gas, you did work of driving and time spent moving it, you got it out of your truck. That's all work. If you bundled it up into small packages of firewood and sold it, you spend time bundling it into small packages. You spend time selling it on the street corner. But a capitalist doesn't spend his own labor. A capitalist pays other people for labor. And so that becomes the big question here. If I'm going to add labor, and then that's how I'm going to make more money, how much is labor worth? It seems like it should be worth the value that it adds. If you added $10, that's how much the labor is worth. And if you were to go into the parking lot of Home Depot and ask some guy, they have these day laborers, guys that will work for you for the day. And if you said, hey man, do you know how to make chairs? Si, senor, I know how to make chairs. And I'm not trying to be racist, but he probably is a Spanish speaker guy. And I said, what's your name? It's Pedro. Pedro, can you make chairs? Si, senor, very good chairs. Well, I need you to make this one chair. How much is that? Your labor for that? That's $10. I'm not stupid. So I gotta pay $100 for my wood. I gotta pay $10 for Pedro. That's how much the labor is worth. It's worth what it added. So then how do I make profit? That's the big question for capitalism. If I have to pay laborers to do the labor, how do I get more value out of the laborer than I'm paying the laborer? You said you were just willing to do it because you were so happy to get a job. And that is basically it, is if you're desperate and don't have another way to be a capitalist yourself, you don't own anything, you're like willing to take what they pay me. But Marx says in real terms, that's not the real value. So what Marx is saying here, and we need to add this key term. What I just explained to you is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is the you couldn't remember the word for a second, but labor is a very important word for Marx. In his view, labor is what creates all value. If we think things are valuable as humans, according to Marx, when we say something's valuable, what we're saying is that thing took a lot of work. Do you agree with that? If you ask a capitalist, like if you were to go take the economics class here, and the whole field of economics is looking at capitalism from a capitalist perspective, like how can we make more money and stuff like that. And if you ask in the economics class, where does value come from? Why are some things more valuable than another? Do you know what answer they give you in the economics class? What is the law in economics that explains why some things are more valuable than others? The law is the law of supply and demand. In other words, according to the field of economics, things are more valuable than others because of the law of supply and demand. If you're a college graduate person, you should know about the law of supply and demand. So if you don't know about it, let me explain to you. It's the idea that if there's a lot of something but nobody wants it, in other words, supply is high but demand, people wanting it, is low, well, if I have that supply, I can't sell it for a lot because no one wants to buy it, and there's tons of it. On the other hand, if I've got something that there's only a little bit of, like gold, and lots of people want it, well, then I can charge more for it. The demand is high and the supply is low. And so that is true. We saw that with the pandemic, when, we see that with the supply chain problems that we've had in America, when the supply goes down of things at your grocery store, like meat, then they start charging you way more for the meat. So there's nothing untrue about the law of supply and demand. But Marx says, but it's hiding something. Why do people pay more for something if there's not much of it? What are they paying for? And he says what they're really paying for is labor. If something is hard to get, what that means, hard, means somebody has to work hard to get it, like gold. Why is gold more valuable than iron? It's harder to find. It's harder to process. It's harder to refine. It's harder to get gold than it is to get iron. So yeah, the supply of iron is higher than the supply of gold, but what that means then is if you want to get gold, you got to put a lot of labor into it. You got to pay a lot of people, money to dig your gold up and stuff like that. So the point is in his view, all value comes from labor. So if capitalists are able to sell things for more than they paid for them, they must be using labor to make it more valuable. And if the laborer isn't getting the money, then in some sense it's being exploited. The labor isn't being paid the value that it itself created. So how does that happen? How are capitalists able to do that? If Pedro in the parking lot at Home Depot won't work for me for less than $10, why do we as the working class people go and work for the capitalists so that they can make all this money? Why do we agree to it? How does it happen? And this is what Marx calls, I don't know which Roman numeral I'm on. I think if we said that was number 3 was the theory of supply, the labor theory of value. Then we're on number 4, which is surplus value. How can I get more value than I'm paying people for? If I'm a capitalist and I'm trying to get Pedro to make my chair, how can I get him to work for me for like $9 or $8 instead of the $10 that his labor is going to create for me? To understand this, we got to go back to those enclosure acts that were happening in England when the peasants were getting kicked off the land. If my name was Peter, not Pedro, because I live in England, and I'm a chair maker or a table maker, I make nice chairs up there in the north of England, and I've been at my chair shop my whole life. My dad worked at this chair shop. My grandpa worked at the chair shop. That's what we do. We make chairs. In fact, our last name is Chairmaker, Peter Chairmaker. I come from that family. But now I've been told by a sheriff, they came and unrolled the scroll and they said, by order of parliament, I have to vacate this land, so I don't get to be in my shop anymore. So where do I go? Well, all I have now is a few tools. I have a wagon. I have my wife and kids, my wagon and my tools. That's what I got. What can I do now? Well, everyone get in the wagon. Let's they're telling me London is the place to go now. So we were up in the north of England. London is where this auction happened. London is where all the merchants are with the money. And I guess it's a new world we're living in where I don't live out in the countryside making chairs, but I got to go to the city. And so we go to the city, and when we get to the city, we see this huge thing there. It's called a chair factory. And it says Flax Chair Factory on there. And I'm Peter Chairmaker, but some guy named Flax is standing outside of the chair factory, and he's got a very nice suit on. He's got an Armani suit on, and he sees me, and let's just pretend I'm Flax with the nice suit, and you're Peter Chairmaker. Hey, how you doing? Okay, not so good. Nice to see you. You got a beautiful family, and look at these nice tools you got. You look like you might be a chairmaker. Well, yeah, I'm a chair maker. You're a chair maker? Well, I'm a chair factory owner. I got this whole chair factory here, and I'm looking for guys just like you to come work at my chair factory. What do you say? You want to come work for me? No, don't answer yet, Peter. We got to talk turkey. We got to talk brass tacks here. We got to negotiate. That's what we do, capitalists, business people, right? Business people negotiate. So how much, do I need to pay you to come work in my chair factory? So Peter thinks about it and says, well, let me think. When I was employed myself up in the countryside, let's see, I woke up around 10 a.m. every day. I worked in my chair shop till about 1 in the afternoon. Then I went to the marketplace and sold my chair for $10. And then I took my $10 and I went to the other part of the marketplace, bought some food for the family. On my way home, I stopped at the pub. Then I went to church and prayed for a while. Wait, so Pedro, stop talking there for a second. Peter, stop talking. So $10, that's what you made per day up there at your chair shop? Well, yeah, about $10 a day is what I was making. Well, that's what we're going to pay you right here in the chair factory, $10 a day. Works out perfectly. So what do you say? You want to come work for me for $10 a day? Okay, fair enough. So when can I see you tomorrow? You'll have to be here at 5 in the morning. And you can go home to your family at about 10 at night tomorrow. Okay? We'll see you here at 5 in the morning. Nice talking to you. So what just happened there? He got the same amount of money that he was making, $10. But what's his day like? Before, when he was self-employed, he only worked a few hours for the day. He had other things in his life, like going to the pub, being with his family, going to the church, things like that. But now, the capitalist just told him, if you want to make $10 working for me, you've got to work 16-hour day. That's what the capitalists were expecting at the beginning of capitalism. So one of the ways to make profit is called absolute surplus labor, or absolute surplus value. Absolute meaning every hour that's worked makes more profit for the capitalist. It's called, in Marx's terms, prolongation of labor. Prolongation, meaning making labor take longer than it would otherwise. Meaning if you're a self-employed worker, you wouldn't work yourself 16 hours a day, probably. You would give yourself time for other things in life besides work and making money. Because we as human beings have other things we care about besides work and making money. But if you're a capitalist, all you care about is how much profit you're going to make, and so you need to work here as long as possible for me to make as much profit as possible. So in that first couple hours you came at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, in the first couple hours of making chairs, you made enough for him to pay you the $10. But he's not going to give you that $10 now after the first 3 hours. He's kind of putting that on the bulletin board and saying, after you've been here another 14 hours, 12 hours, then I'll give you your 10. So it's like in the first few hours, you make the amount of value to pay yourself. But then many more hours, you're there making value for the capitalist. So Marx says that's not a very sustainable way of making profit. Can you think of why not? That's not the best way. This is the no-brainer way. Why would that not actually be, in the long term, a good way for capitalists to make profit, to make people work 16 hours a day? Remember, they were children. Remember, we talked about capitalism at the beginning, big factories with a lot of children working in them, 16-hour days. Why is that maybe not sustainable? Well, you guys work 8-hour days and you're like this right now, or if you even work. What would people be like if working 16 hours a day, day after day?
Really tired?
Dead.
Yeah.
Literally, you die after a while. I mean, you're really tired, your body breaks apart, you start getting illness all the time, and you don't really survive. That was one reason they wanted to hire kids, is you could get these orphans, people that didn't have parents around and stuff like that, and you could work them really long hours, and then if they die, like, nobody complained. But the point is that's not sustainable. One big reason people die. The big reason it's not sustainable is working people themselves, the labor movement organized to say, you can't work us this many hours. So they used to say, yeah, we'll work you 16 hours a day. Well, working people joined together and went on strike and said, no, we're not going to work 16 hours a day. In England, these big conflicts that happened, and then remember, this is conflict theory, these workers said, no, we're not working 16 hours a day. We will only work 12-hour days. So at first, the big fights were over 12-hour days. And the owners of the factories like, no, goddammit, you're not working on 12. You've got to work 16. And they kill each other over this. Finally, the working class was able to say 10-hour day. We want 10-hour day. And they were able to win the 10-hour day in England. It was actually in America that working people said, 8 hours would be the fair day because, and the slogan they gave was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Meaning we deserve some leisure time, not just work and sleep like animals, but 8 hours where you get to do what you want. So there's 24 hours a day. Should 16 of it be spent at the factory and only 8 sleeping and with your family? No. So they said 8 for work, 8 for rest, 8 for, and in America, they won that. So in today's capitalism, you can't work people 16 hours. I said, why is it not sustainable? Well, it's against the law now. You can't work people 16 hours a day, or if you do, you've got to pay them overtime. And there are still people that do it, and it's illegal. That's what they're called, sweatshops, or they have these like illegal factories where immigrant people who owe money to the factory owners have to work 16 hours a day and things like that. But it's not legal, and so it's not really a sustainable thing. And in any case, it's not the best way of making profit. So if the laws get changed, which they did, and you're told as a capitalist flax share factory, you can't work Pedro, or you can't work Peter for 16 hours, you can only work them for 8. Is there something I can do? Do you have any ideas of how I can now keep making as much profit as I was making, but you're only coming for 8 hours a day now? What would be another way of getting surplus value? Another way of you getting to make more than I'm paying you so that I can make money. I can work you really long hours, but that's a dumb way of doing it and it doesn't work. And they still do it in other countries, in China. But did you know that in America, we actually work more hours than most people do on planet Earth? Like in Europe, a full work week is 35 hours. In ours, we still say 40 hours is a full-time job. But in Europe, you're considered a full-time worker if you're working like 32, 35 hours. Even Japan, if you count up the amount of hours Japanese people work each year, it's fewer than the average American worker. So we like to think we're so advanced in America and our workers have power, which they used to. But we work long hours in America. But there's a better way, if you're a capitalist, to make money than working people long hours. It's called relative surplus value, meaning in relatively less time, so now in 8 hours instead of 16, I'm going to make even more profit than I made before in 8 hours. Can you think of any ways they could do that? How could I make, so she makes tables or chairs. How can I get, or you make chairs, and you can make 1 chair an hour. That's what we determined. How can I get you to make 3 chairs an hour? 5 chairs an hour? 10 chairs an hour? Any ideas? Because I want to make a lot of chairs. That's how I'm going to make profit.
Hiring more people.
But if I have to pay each one of them more, then I'm not getting more profit. So I'm wanting her to make more than 1 chair an hour. If I hire more people making 1 chair an hour, it doesn't get me anywhere because I can still only work them 8 hours. But I want to have each of those people making 3 chairs an hour, 5 chairs an hour. Now we're talking profits.
Like worse quality chair?
Well, that's not going to sell in the marketplace. Somebody else is making chairs that actually work, and when they sit on my chairs, they fall on their butt and break their tailbone, and now I've got lawsuits. Like, no. So what? You guys are fresh in the world. I guess you're young. No ideas about how I can make you anything that I could give you to help you make chairs at 3 an hour rather than just 1 an hour.
More money?
More money. Yeah, bonuses could work, but still you will reach a human limit of how many chairs the human body can make in 3 hours. And I want you to actually make more chairs than is humanly possible. Is there a way I can get you to make more chairs than is humanly possible? Machines, thank you, finally. Yeah, so if you're just making chairs by hand with tools and you're wagon, you're a skilled chair maker, you're an independent commodity producer, you're not making tons of chairs at once. You're making a nice quality chair. But, and you're saying, well, make it less quality. Maybe it is lower quality, but what it is mass produced, made at large numbers. And so it's mainly machines. So it's called intensification of labor. If you can make people more productive in less time, meaning if I can get you to produce 3 chairs an hour instead of 1 chair an hour, I've intensified your labor. I haven't prolonged it. You're only working 1 hour. But there's more coming out of it. I've increased your productivity. And how do we increase productivity? With technology, with machines and technology. What I'm going to call it, machines and technology, overall it's scientific management. Machines, yes. Machines make things quicker than humans can. Machines don't get tired. Machines don't get hungry. Machines don't need sleep. Machines don't form unions. Machines don't have children to feed. Machines don't want to go to church. So yes, machines are a big reason why capitalists can make more money, and that's why the Industrial Revolution happened. They started realizing that machines could make things much more productive. But it isn't just machines, and mechanization is the other way we put it, making things mechanical. But another key thing is assembly lines. It's called scientific management because they studied production the way a scientist would study something. And they in fact hired scientists, and that's one of the ways sociology got started. Was companies trying to figure out how can we get our factory to produce more chairs in less time? And so they would study these questions. How can we figure this out? And they were often called time motion studies. How much time does each motion take? So if you're making a chair, you have the motion, first of all, of cutting the wood. And then you've got to join the wood, and you've got to sand the wood, and you've got to shellac the wood. And so you have these different motions, and each motion takes a certain amount of time. There's even motion between motions. So you were sanding over here, but then to go to the shellacking station, you walked over here. That was 1 second when you weren't making anything. You were walking. Well, if I'm going to be a scientific factory, I want to cut down all those times people weren't making stuff. So 1 second here, that's too much. We want, in fact, a much quicker thing is an assembly line, a conveyor belt that carries the table down the line so that one worker, all he does is cut. And another worker, all she does is join. And another worker, all she does is shellac the stuff. And nobody's walking anywhere. They're just doing their same task over and over and over, the same task over and over. That kind of thing leads to what's called de-skilling. You're trying to take the skill out of making the chair or table. When she was an independent commodity producer, Peter chairmaker from the north of England, she was a skilled chairmaker. It was a trade her father taught her, and she had to apprentice for years before she was the full chairmaker. And her dad and grandpa both apprenticed, and they really know a lot of stuff about cutting wood, shaping it, joining it, making a beautiful, high-quality chair. But capitalists don't want all that skill because all that skill is itself valuable. In other words, if you ask why is one laborer more valuable than another laborer, it's because of labor. We said labor is what makes things valuable. Well, if you're a skilled worker, you've invested more time and effort in being a skilled worker. And so if somebody's paying you per hour for your work, they're paying you for the labor you invested in yourself. Or like my kids are learning piano. Like if you got really good at piano and somebody paid you to listen to piano, they're paying you for all that practice you did to become a great piano player. And so from a capitalist standpoint, we don't want any skill involved. Skill costs money. It's labor that's been invested. I'm going to have to pay high labor costs for that labor. So by turning everything into one skill, one thing you do all day long, then you don't have all these other skills. This guy that all he's doing is cutting, he doesn't know anything about joining, about shellacking, about sanding. All he does is that one thing. And if you do that one thing all day long, you're going to get really good at that one thing, and you're going to be able to do it much more quickly than somebody who's doing all the things and doing all the motions in between the things. And so the intensification of labor is, the de-skilling of labor, it makes the labor less valuable. That means I can hire anybody off the street. I don't need to hire you anymore, Peter Chairmaker. I can hire some idiot off the street who doesn't know how to do anything and train them quickly that all you have to do is use this machine. You just stick this wood through the automatic lathe. You don't need to know how to shape a chair leg. You just stick it in the machine and zzz, chair leg, zzz, chair leg, zzz, chair leg, zzz, chair leg, all day long, zip, chair leg. It's, in Marx's terms, very alienating to sit there doing the same thing all day long, and all you really are is helping the machine do it. You're really just a part of the machine, doing the machine's work with it. You're not getting to be a human who makes things, who's creative, who people can go, wow, what a great chair you made. You just go, you're a working slob making nothing at the factory. No respect. So working people, the whole working class was de-skilled. The whole peasant class used to know how to do stuff. They were in charge of their own lives. They grew their own food. They made their own stuff. They made their own houses. Now we have working people in America that most of us don't know how to do anything. That's why we even have a show called Survivor, where they go on the show and they're like, here, try to live. And I'm like, I don't know how to do anything. And it's much better when you don't know how to do anything, because then they can pay you very little to do something. And we take it. Oh, okay, $5 an hour, okay, whatever. $15 an hour, whatever. And people are like, man, those McDonald's guys are making $15 an hour? Well, yeah, but how much is the investors at McDonald's? The guys that don't do anything, they just invested money in McDonald's. They're making the real money. Anyway, so Marx is saying, it has a lot of benefits, this de-skilling. It makes the working class totally dependent on the upper class. And before, the peasants had some power because they could take care of themselves. But now the working class, if you don't have a job, you're homeless on the street. You barely can survive. So you have to go work for a capitalist and basically take what they're offering. And so, but Marx says this way of doing things, using machines and paying people low wages to help the machines make stuff, it's great for capitalists. They make tons of profit, but it's not sustainable for society. It can't last. So our Roman numeral 5, I guess, is polarization. We already learned this word when we talked about Marx's diagnosis of the illness of capitalism, and he said that, as we talked about, that capitalism over time would suffer polarization. Polarization is when the small group at the top, the owners, another word for them is the bourgeoisie, another word for them is the capitalists, whatever you want to call them. They're a small group at the top, and you've got this other group at the bottom called the workers. Or you can call them the proletariat. Or you can call them wage slaves, or whatever you want to call them, the masses. And over time, according to Marx, under capitalism, this group grows smaller and smaller. And as it does, it gets bigger, it gets richer and richer. And over time, under capitalism, this group goes bigger and bigger. And as it does, it gets poorer. So I'm trying to draw polarization here as a process that unfolds over time, where the working class gets bigger and bigger and poorer, and the owning class, the capitalists, gets smaller and smaller and richer. To the point where, as many people have said today on planet Earth, you have a very wealthy 1% of people that owns most of planet Earth, and 99% of people that are barely making it or are trying to make it. And so why does that happen? What is it about machines and assembly lines and de-skilling that leads to this? Well, let's go back to our chair factory, Flax Chair Factory. I'm the owner of it. You guys are my workers. This is our assembly line. You're lined up in machine rows to do the work. And I got some news for you guys in the factory. You know, I've been talking to the board, our board of investors, and we've got a new business plan, a new business model to put our competitors out of business. We're going to be bringing in some new machines into the factory. And so that's good news because we're going to kick ass in the next couple quarters, financial quarters. But it's kind of bad news because for some of you, because about half of you right here, from here on, you guys, I'm going to have to lay you off. So I'm sorry if you've been loyal workers of Flax Chair Company, but bye-bye. We'll see you later. You guys, I'll see you guys here tomorrow, and we're gonna, have the factory. The machines will be here, and we're gonna get to work, and we're gonna kick some butt. Okay? Well, what just happened? In capitalism, capitalists compete with each other. So there's capitalists all trying to own things and make money, and some own chair factories. And there's Flax Chair Factory, but there's also Acme Chair Factory and Smith Chair Factory, and they're trying to make money too. But at a certain point, we might beat them. And we beat them because we got smarter and we went to relative surplus value quicker than they did. So they're still working people long hours, and they're still, making one chair an hour, but we brought in machines. And machines meant what? Well, for one thing, some people, workers, lost their job. If you're replaced by machines, what are you now? Now you're not a worker. Now you're in this new class of people called the Industrial Reserve Army, Marx calls them. Or in other words, the unemployed. The unemployed are an important part of capitalism. Capitalism needs a lot of people to not have a job. Why? So that they can put pressure on the people that do have a job to not demand higher wages. So I just came back 6 months later to say to you guys, well, no, I didn't finish my speech, actually. I was giving that speech about replacing you with machines, or I said bye-bye to you guys. I also have some other news for you guys that are still here. You guys get to keep your job. That's really good news. And the other good news is I'm only going to pay you half of what I was paying you before. Are we happy with that? No? Why not? You should be very happy with that. Why not? Why should you be? Because see up in the window there, those faces? See all those faces, the hungry faces? Who are those people? They're the people at Acme Chair Factory. And they're the people from this chair factory who came in earlier this morning while you were not here yet. And they said they would do your job for a quarter of what I'm paying you. And I said, I can't do that to them. I'm not going to pay them a quarter, but I am going to have to lower your salary in half. So in other words, workers compete too. And if you've got a bunch of unemployed people that don't have any job and they're starving to death, like you said, I'll let's work for $5 an hour. I don't care. If you've got those people, then these people who have a job can't demand higher wages. They can't say, hey, in fact, their wages go down. So over time, this class of people, by the way, some of these people fell into this class because when Acme Chair Factory closed, because they couldn't keep up, if they didn't have the machines, so I didn't make this clear either. If we brought machines in first, so now I am coming back to you with some good news 6 months later, Acme's out of business. Why are they out of business? we were making so many chairs now with our machines that we were able to cut our chair cost, our chair price. So we cut our price. We weren't selling them at a profit, but we did that so that they would not be able to sell any chairs. And they couldn't sell any chairs, and we sold our chairs at a low price, which didn't make much profit for us, if any. But now that they're out of business, now we can raise our price. We can now charge $20 a chair. And we're making a lot more for each chair than we were before. We're also paying you guys a lot less than we were before. So our margin is called. The margin between what it costs me to make each chair and what I'm getting for each chair just got a lot bigger. So I and the capitalists just made a lot more money by bringing in machines and having a lot of unemployed working people. Some capitalists fell out of the capitalist class too because they were working at owning chair factories and managing chair factories, and now they're looking for work at a chair factory. And some of the people working at their chair factory are unemployed completely. So you see how the working class is getting bigger here over time and making less money, while the capitalist class is getting smaller. They're competing with each other, and then they end up dominating industries, and you get monopolies, and you get only a few companies controlling everything. Like if you go to the grocery store right now in the cereal aisle, it looks like there's tons of different cereal companies because there's like a huge aisle of thousands of cereals, it looks like. But really, if you look at how many companies own the cereals, it's like 3. So they have a bunch of different products they're selling you, but it's the same 3 companies because they dominate the industry. And I've always wondered, is cereal really worth $4 a box? It costs them like 70 cents, 50 cents to make that box of cereal, but they're getting that much from you because they're a monopoly. They dominate the industry. Anyway, so fewer and fewer capitalists means less competition, and they can charge whatever they want, and the rest of us are just buying what they're selling. And so anyway, Marx said over time, that's not going to sustain. If you have this many people out of work and this many people barely getting paid anything and a very small group of people with way too much, eventually this group is going to unify and say, guys, let's come together and overthrow this group at the top. Maybe not overthrow them completely, but certainly come together as unions. That's happened at various times in history, working people joining together and saying, for example, the flight attendants right now, I just heard the flight, if you ever fly, I don't know how many of us fly, flying's become kind of a nightmare for a lot of people, but especially for the flight attendants who get constantly harassed by passengers and stuff like that, and they get paid very little for how much work they do. So they're about to go on strike. We'll see if they're trying to strike multiple companies, which often doesn't happen with working people. Like if Starbucks workers go on strike, they're just striking Starbucks. But these flight attendants are joining hands across companies and saying, Alaska Airlines, Southwest, let's all link arms and not work for what they're paying us until they pay us more. And so that kind of conflict between the workers and the owners is what Marx is talking about. And we'll learn more about it when we come back from our vacation. By the way, if you get nice time off, that's another win for the labor movement. Working people came together, demanded holidays. Maybe not President's Day, but certainly Labor Day and other holidays were demanded by working people. The weekend itself that you're about to go on is something working people demanded and got. Otherwise, you might still be working 7 days a week, 16 hours. All right, fight on, working power. See you later.
Thank you, sir.
All right, take it easy. Have a good weekend.
You too, thank you. You too.